Study section 7. Wole Soyinka. Introduction. Wole Soyinka was born on 13th July 1934 in Ijebu-Ishara, Ogun State, Nigeria. He studied both in Nigeria and the United Kingdom. Soyinka is an eclectic writer who refuses to preach the cutting off of any source of knowledge, Oriental, European, African, Polynesian, etc. Among his works are The Road, 1965, The Lion and the Jail, 1963, The Swamp Dwellers, 1963, The Strong Breed, 1963, The Bacchae of Euripides, 1973, The Trial of Brother Jeru, 1963, Kongi's Harvest, 1967, A Dance of the Forest, 1963. Objective. At the end of this lecture, you should be able to access the works of Soyinka, his eclectic principle, and his indebtedness to his Yoruba tradition. At the level of interpreting his selected place in this lecture, and importantly, reflecting African realities in this play, as in the use of satire. Content. Soyinka multifarious identifies are, however, tributaries of a single stream, fed by distinctive currents of his Yoruba culture. He has explained that he is being drawn into the theaters of both entertainment and politics by the same fundamental commitment to human freedom and justice, which has led him to resist all regimes that deny them, and a belief that the exemplary individual can and must influence the course of public events. Soyinka's early plays are more directly concerned with the historical transition from colonialism to independence, and are explorations of cultural contrasts and confrontations in its period of adjustments. In The Swamp Dwellers, 1963, which is misfortune occasioned by nature, both physical and human, the authority caricatured informed by Kadiye, a corrupt village priest of the Niger Delta. The Kadiye is a charlatan, self-serving opportunist who accepts sacrificial offerings to the local deity, the swamp serpent, but fraudulently converts most of the produce for his own use and uses superstition to keep the village at subsistence level. He is confronted and cross-examined about the efficacy of his sacrifices by the youth Ugwezu when the latter returns from the metropolis, where he has lost his wife and his money to his unscrupulous brother, to find his farm ruined by flood. The play queried the dependency fostered by fatalistic religions. The Kadiye serpent cult helps the village to rationalize its failure and inertia, reconciles it to its suffering, and discourages positive efforts at redress, like those proposed early in the play by an enterprising wandering beggar from the Islamic north. The latter, who appears to be the play's model for self-reliance and to represent the only hope for survival, denounces the village's sluggish descendants on divine favor and resolves to reclaim land from the swamp in defiance of serpents, priests, and community. Under his questionable influence, Ugwezu changes from a man of simple animist faith into an iconoclastic artist, exposing an exploitative and corrupt ritual practice and revealing that there is no serpent, only the Kadiye himself. However, Ugwezu fails. He is in fact too passionate to succeed. This, however, is not a triumph of tradition. It is rather an indication of the enormous task ahead. The play ends not with the communal casting off of superstition, but with a conservative community rallying to the support of its outraged priest. It is essentially a familiar domestic tragedy, and the real victims are Ugwezo parents and the swamp dwellers, who occupy the stage for most of the play. Ugwezo challenges the priest's authority on their behalf, directing at its proper targets the resentment that they reflect of each other in futile role, but it does so without their consent and support. The parents represent a moribund other, too deeply sunk in spiritual lethargy to hear the voice of reason. At the end of the play, they side fearfully with traditional religious practice. The Swamp Dweller is a sober, atmospheric drama that generates a mood of dark foreboding and a near tragic power. One major preoccupation of modern African playwrights is the use of satire to depict societal realities. In The Trial of Brother Jero, 1963, Soyinka portrays the hypocrisy and charlatanism associated with over-bloated religious sects in Africa, but here they are presented in a much lighter, comic vein. Brother Jeroboam, or Jero, is a messianic beach prophet, a trickster who set up a chunk on the beach, prophesying golden futures in return for cash belonging to one of the revivalist Christian sects that were a marked feature of the certain transition from a communalist to a consumerist society at the time of independence. Jero is presented as a shameless manipulator and exploiter of his gullible disciples, notable the lawyer Shem, whom he used to advance his own material interest and to avoid paying his debts. The play is a satirical comedy with all the staple ingredients of the genre: confused and concealed identities, chance encounters, farcically piled up incidents, the prolonging of suspense by the delayed recognition of hidden links between lives. The play ends with a rather sudden and contrived stratagem when the long-suffering Chum finally tumbles his tricks and threatens to expose him. Jero has Chumen packed off a lunatic asylum with the aid of a local member of parliament, MP, whom he has ensnared by prophecies of a ministry. At the close, the intelligent criminal hero has escaped both payment of his debt and the wrath of his disaffected disciples, and with a politician among his followers, he has moved one bigger, more dangerous game. According to Derek Wright, The Trials of Brother Jero is essentially light comedy, a picaresque trickster narrative in which the wit and ingenuity of the hero's rapt genius, along with his engaging kados, are the main sources of pleasure in performance. 2002, page 8112. Importantly, religious bigotry and hypocrisy is one of the viruses that has plagued Africa for a very long time, and Soyinka in his play gives vent to this malaise in The Lion and the Girl, 1963. The theme of youthful revolt against reactionary authority is given its most subtle, provocative treatment. In a comedy of wit and charm, here it is laughter at the expense of Lakunle, the voluble teacher in Ilujile, a community of ineffectual dreamers. According to Oyin Ogunba, Lakunle has a too prolonged ambition to transform Ilujile into a modern community free of the clog of tradition and to marry Sidi, the village Bele, 1977, page 103. He fails in both. Sidi never really comes to understand this talkative teacher, and she prefers the mustiness of Shiv Baroka. Lakunle fails in his other ambition because he conceives his philanthropy in sentimental terms. Now, the wily old Baroka decides to entice into his harem of his wives the young village beauty and jewel of the village, Sidi, who has been made famous by a visiting photographer for a glossy magazine and is receiving the rival attentions of an absurd westernized school teacher. Lakunle, after allaying Sidi's fear by circulating a rumor that he is impotent, Baroka lures her to dinner in his bedroom, where predictably she is seduced. However, Lakunle offers to take up the fallen woman, but in a twist, she rejects him in favor of the more matured man. The Lion and the Jewel is not a drama of cultural conflict between traditional and modern values in the world of Derek Wright. Lakunle's half-baked, ill-assimilated values amount only to a travesty of Western culture, constituted from its most tawdry trimmings, nightclubs, pin-up, photography, cosmetics. 2002, 813. Also, tradition have no inherent value for Baroka. He simply uses them to retain power. His traditionalism is selective, and he is not averse to performing highly untraditional acts, such as deflowering a virgin to render her ineligible for bride price. The truth is that Baroka's real policy is to leave everything as it is, and thus to keep intact that very sameness, the spotted wove of sameness. The Lion and the Jewel is a slippery, controversial play, much to the despair of dogmatists. It retains an independent-minded fidelity to human experience that insists on keeping all options open, refusing to be confined in simplistic, stereotypical formula of stagnant traditionalism versus progressive westernization. It is clear that both Baroka and Lakunle fails in their leadership roles. In the meantime, the society suffers because those who are apparently best equipped to lead do not measure up to the task. In The Strong Breed, 1963, Wole Soyinka develops another important traditional African idea, that of scapegoats in an African society. The protagonist, a man, has absconded from his ritual heredity in his native village only to find himself hooked in the same process in another village. But unlike his own, strangers are coerced into the role in the absence of a volunteer. But the year's ills are not projected into an effigy through causing and touch, as in Iman's village, but are transferred through real violence to the person of the carrier himself. A man is slow to understand these crucial differences, and the rite goes disastrously wrong when it flees from its unexpected cruelties. It ends with his pursuit through the village and his death in an animal trap. When a man is eventually forced to bear the rite, he does it with a certain strange power and discovers in the process that this is the role which he has been unconsciously moving all the time. He has divine communion with the spirit of his ancestors and predecessors in the role, and is encouraged to think that the role is a worthwhile one, and that only a special breed of people, the strong breed, can be entrusted with the task and be expected to carry it through satisfactorily. In the words of Oyin Ogumba, Soyinka constructs an identity between the carrier in traditional Africa and the artist in the literate tradition of modern West Africa, or in fact of any community. The artist, carrier, is saddled with the weight of human sins and foibles, and his task is to help his community achieve a purgation. But this is a harlequin task, and the artist carrier has to die in the process. So he is a sacrificial lamb, and only those who are called can muster the requisite spiritual stamina to succeed. 1977, page 99. Soyinka's purpose is neither to uphold nor to ridicule ritual superstitions, but to create the impression of a wholly self-apprehended world, viewed from an inside perspective, and to present its confusion of moral and ritual values in terms of his own custom and beliefs, like Christ. A man sacrifices himself for an ungrateful community, but because he is a coerced victim, the redemptive, beneficial value of the rite is left in some doubt. Yet, there is a sense in which a man keeps faith with his heredity by infusing the base rite with something of the communally oriented morality of the original. According to Derek Wright, a man tries to halt the ritual process because he sees altruistically that the performance unwillingness and the officiant's corruptions render it valueless, and this perception seems to have rubbed off on the villagers by the end of the play. 2002, 814. The radical effect on them of the sight of the crucified man and the desertion of their leaders suggests that the established order has been shaken, winding back the clock on the decades of corrupt malpractice, and that, as is often the case in Soyinka's work, a moribund tradition has been revitalized by an outsider's vision. In the Bacchanals of Euripides, 1973, which is an adaptation of Euripides' Bacchae, in a militant mood after his Civil War interment, turns his attention from moral logic of ritual to the political logic of revolution, albeit a revolution awkwardly mixed up with Dionysian religion's ecstasy. However, Soyinka's The Bacchanals of Euripides, in a burst of revolutionary optimism, halts at the wine and the rebirth, implying a finality that takes the slaughter of Pentheus out of the fatalistic circle of alternation, closing the gap between ritual and reality. His adaptation questions whether society benefits from any kind of individual sacrifice other than that in which ritual forms are strategically directed at the power centers from which evil emanates. Notably, Soyinka's Bacchae is not Euripides. This Dionysius is conceived, in Yoruba version, as the primal creative energy source of which the triumph's military power taps only a fraction. In his Ogunian incarnation, the god represents a harmonizing balance of extremes, not the reductive force that in the Greek originates acquires disproportionate, murderous power and demand absolute submission once it has been excluded or suppressed. Though he abhors the outrage of Dionysius' heartless justice, Soyinka's overall vision in his vision is celebratory. The play ends with a disquieting acceptance of the god's alternating ecstasies and pain, his gentleness and ferocity, and even the savagery of his revenge is given a hopeful political construction as having healing and regenerative dimensions that are not merely part of an unceasing cycle of atrocities. Summary. In this lecture, we have taken a look at Soyinka's dramatic prowess, a protean figure of bewildering versatility, his notion of tragedy, Ogunian incarnation, also an eclectic and syncretic playwright, his notion of satire in application to the charlatanistic disposition of Africa. Importantly, just like his contemporary J.P. Clark, the influences of Greek tradition on their adaptative works. End of study section 7. Thanks for listening.